Have you ever been in a moment where everyone assumed you didn't belong, where the world seemed ready to humiliate you just for showing up? Imagine sitting in the seat you paid for, only to be confronted by someone who believes their privilege gives them the right to tear you down. That was Dr. Serena Hayes's reality on a luxurious flight from New York to Los Angeles, a public display of arrogance. A young heiress hurling insults and even cake at her, all eyes watching, phones recording every second. Now, imagine it's your integrity, your reputation, and your hard-earned authority being questioned in front of dozens of strangers, and the choice is yours. Do you retreat silently, allow the humiliation to define you, or do you rise, calm and unwavering, ready to reclaim control? Could you stay composed when injustice and entitlement collide with your dignity? Could you turn a moment of public shame into a declaration of undeniable truth? As Serena demonstrates, the power isn't in shouting louder, it's in standing firm, thinking clearly, and acting strategically, even when the world expects you to crumble. So, pause for a moment and ask yourself, if it were you in that seat, how would you respond when your credibility is challenged and everyone is watching? Join us as we relive this unforgettable story of resilience, dignity, and justice. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to follow every twist of the journey. The first-class cabin of Flight 842 hummed softly with the muted whispers of luxury travelers. Sunlight filtered through the oval windows, illuminating polished leather seats and glinting silverware on foldable trays. Dr. Serena Hayes, CEO of Novatech, adjusted her navy blazer, smoothing it over her lap as she prepared for the 5-hour journey from New York to Los Angeles. She had barely taken her seat when a commotion erupted 2 rows ahead. Victoria Caldwell, the young heiress of Caldwell Airlines, strutted down the aisle, her jeweled bracelets catching the light. Her heels clicked sharply on the aisle carpet, a sound that seemed louder than the hum of the engines. Serena noticed the way Victoria's eyes fixed on her, a combination of disdain and entitlement. Before Serena could react, Victoria's hand shot out, sending a crystal glass of red wine arcing through the air. The liquid struck Serena squarely, dripping down the navy blazer she had carefully chosen for this flight. "You don't belong here," Victoria shouted, her voice slicing through the soft murmur of the cabin. "Go back to where you came from." A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. Some passengers froze in shock, while others fumbled for their phones, eager to capture the unfolding drama. The hum of small cameras, the flicker of recording lights, and the subtle buzz of whispers filled the air. Serena's first instinct was to straighten herself, but her face remained calm. Her eyes, cool and steady, met Victoria's glare. No tears, no shout, just a sharp, calculated quiet that seemed to stretch longer than the 5-foot aisle separating them. Serena's internal dialogue raced for a fraction of a second. Stay calm. Don't let this define you. This is not just about the wine or the insult. It's about what comes next. She drew in a measured breath, letting the aroma of Cabernet linger briefly before responding. Her voice quiet yet firm. "Excuse me. There seems to be a misunderstanding. I assure you, I am a legitimate passenger on this flight." Victoria laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that cut through the cabin. "Legitimate," she repeated, circling Serena as if inspecting some imposter in her midst. Did anyone else see her rifling through confidential documents in the lounge? This is what happens when people like her try to sneak into our world. Serena's mind tightened around a single, clear thought. People like her. That phrase will be remembered. That phrase will expose everything she believes about the world. She stood up slightly, the navy blazer sticking faintly to the damp spot from the wine, and met Victoria's gaze evenly. From the other side of the cabin, flight attendants Lydia Chen and Ethan Moore shifted nervously. Their training, whispered caution, intervene carefully. Avoid confrontation. But Victoria waved them off. Let her stay in her seat. She's clearly not supposed to be here. The subtle tension between protocol and entitlement began to suffuse the cabin air, thickening it. Passengers' eyes darted between the two women. Phones rose like small metallic spears, capturing every movement, every line of tension. A hush fell over the cabin, punctuated only by the occasional clink of utensils from those still attempting breakfast or coffee. Serena bent slightly to adjust her briefcase under the seat, aware of the scattered papers, careful not to let them fall further. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from controlled anticipation. Victoria's heel suddenly pressed down hard on the edge of Serena's briefcase. "Don't touch those," she hissed, loud enough that even the passengers 3 rows back heard. "Security will handle your fake documents." A few stifled coughs of discomfort ran through the crowd. The cruelty was undeniable, and now visible. A couple of passengers leaned closer, drawn to the spectacle. Some feeding the live stream in real time. Serena inhaled, tasting both the bitterness of the wine and the tension in the cabin. Her fingers curled around the edge of her briefcase, grounding herself. She was aware of every camera pointed at her, every whisper, every judgment. This is not humiliation. This is opportunity to show strength without rage. Her lips curved in the faintest of lines, almost imperceptible, as she bent to retrieve the scattered papers. Her hand brushed lightly against a boarding confirmation tucked under her briefcase, a document that could silence the false accusations with undeniable authority. Victoria circled back, hands on hips, eyes scanning the cabin as though expecting applause for her performance. "Do you think you belong here?" she sneered, voice sharper, carrying over the muted engine hum. "Because everyone here's clearly watching, and they all see it, the cheap dress, the fake watch, probably stolen. Look at her pretending to fit in." Serena raised her head slowly, fixing her gaze not just on Victoria, but on the cabin itself. Each passenger, each camera, each phone became part of her silent audience. If they are watching, let them see the truth. Let them see who I am and what entitlement looks like when it crosses the wrong person. She reached into her briefcase deliberately, pulling out a simple business card and handing it to a passenger nearby, who had tentatively offered help. The passenger's eyes widened. They read the card aloud. "Uncertain, Dr. Serena Hayes, Chief Executive Officer, Novatech." A ripple of disbelief spread, though Victoria's laughter only intensified, dismissive and harsh. "That's the most ridiculous fake I've ever seen," she spat, scoffing at the card. Serena's calm did not waver. Her mind centered on what came next. The cabin had quieted further, every eye flicking from card to woman, from woman to card, trying to reconcile the incongruity. Serena's internal voice steadied her. They may doubt now, but the next step will leave no room for denial. Not on this flight, not in this cabin, not in this world. She straightened her back, and for a moment, the sunlight struck her face and blazer in such a way that the wine stain seemed almost irrelevant. She had not yet moved beyond the insult, but the first crack in Victoria's confident veneer had begun. The cabin remained a study in tension, silent passengers, smartphones poised, the faint hum of flight controls in the background. Serena exhaled slowly, her eyes scanning the faces around her. Somewhere in the back, a young man whispered to a friend, "She doesn't even look nervous." The comment, small as it was, captured the sentiment perfectly. Here was someone who, despite being publicly humiliated, radiated an authority that demanded attention. It was subtle, magnetic, and entirely controlled. The first part of this journey had ended not in anger, but in a poised standoff. The battle lines were drawn, and the audience, both on the flight and streaming online, were already captivated. Serena Hayes remained seated, calm, but inside she was calculating each move with precision, aware that at 30,000 feet, one well-timed action could redefine the course of the entire flight and much more beyond it. The cabin remained tense. Passengers shifted in their seats, some leaning forward, others whispering softly, trying not to draw attention to themselves. Serena Hayes stayed perfectly still, the faint stain of red wine on her blazer a subtle reminder of the confrontation. But her posture was unbroken. Every passenger who had raised a phone to film was now frozen, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding. Victoria Caldwell, still standing in the aisle, seemed to grow impatient. Her voice cut through the low murmur like a whip. "Flight attendants, make her leave her seat. She doesn't belong in first class." Lydia Chen hesitated, glancing at Ethan Moore, who shifted nervously under Victoria's piercing gaze. The cabin felt like it had shrunk in size. Every head turned toward Serena, as if the entire flight were holding its collective breath. Serena's eyes met the gaze of several passengers. Natalie Foster, sitting a few rows back, had her phone in hand, filming carefully but discreetly. Michael Bryant, on the opposite side of the cabin, leaned forward slightly, whispering to his neighbor. "She's staying calm. That's impressive." Serena caught his glance and offered a subtle nod, almost imperceptible, acknowledging his quiet support without breaking her composure. Inside, she reminded herself, every eye here is watching. I cannot allow them to see doubt, only clarity. Victoria's face contorted with annoyance. She stepped closer, her voice dripping with malice. "Don't try to act innocent now. Everyone saw you at the lounge earlier. Don't think I won't call security the moment we land." Her words hung heavy in the cabin, amplified by the soft hum of the plane's engines. It was an assertion of power, a claim that she controlled this space and everyone in it. Serena tilted her head slightly, the faintest smirk crossing her lips. Her voice was soft but carried unmistakable authority. "I am fully aware of your accusations, but perhaps verifying facts before judgment would benefit us all." The words were calm, measured, but their weight seemed to settle over the cabin, silencing even the faintest whispers. Lydia Chen exchanged a glance with Ethan Moore. The two attendants had been trained for tense situations, but neither had ever encountered a passenger who radiated such controlled authority. Ethan cleared his throat. "Miss Caldwell, maybe we should." Victoria cut him off with a sharp gesture, snapping her fingers. "No excuses. She stays in that seat if she dares. But I'm watching her every move." Serena's mind briefly flickered to the papers in her briefcase. Every contract, every signature, every official document that could validate her position rested there. She felt the weight of the situation but did not panic. This is where composure counts. The whine, the insult, they are insignificant compared to what comes next. Victoria, frustrated by the silence and the lack of an immediate reaction, moved to grab Serena's briefcase from under the seat. Serena gently pressed a hand on the edge of it, subtly asserting control. "Please," she said softly, "I will manage my belongings myself." Her tone was polite, almost deferential, but every passenger could sense the firmness behind it. It was a small but unmistakable act of quiet dominance. The cabin had grown still, save for the occasional whisper or phone camera adjusting to capture the moment. Serena could feel the tension, like a taut wire stretched across every row. They are all waiting for a response. They do not yet realize how wrong their assumptions are. She glanced at Victoria, who was breathing slightly heavier now, the sharp edges of arrogance beginning to fray. The heiress's hand trembled faintly as she gestured toward the briefcase, but Serena remained seated, eyes calm, exuding unshakable authority. From the back of the cabin, Natalie Foster zoomed in on Serena's face with her phone, capturing the subtle interplay of calm and resilience. Michael Bryant's fingers hovered over the screen, sharing the live feed with a few close contacts. It was happening in real time, the humiliation, the standoff, and the unspoken challenge between entitlement and integrity. Inside, Serena's thoughts were measured. Every move counts, every gesture, every word. They will interpret everything. Stay firm. Let them see who holds the truth. She lightly adjusted her blazer, touched the briefcase, and settled her gaze on Victoria with quiet confidence. The heiress's lips parted, as if to speak, but Serena's calm presence made her hesitate. A subtle, almost imperceptible shift, but enough to signal the beginning of a fracture in the heiress's control over the room. The rest of the passengers leaned forward slightly, some whispering among themselves, sensing that this was no ordinary flight. Cameras continued to record. Phones hovered like sentinels capturing each moment. The quiet tension was palpable, a mixture of anticipation, outrage, and curiosity. Serena had turned the humiliation into a moment that demanded attention, commanding respect without raising her voice. And the first waves of influence had already begun to ripple across the cabin. Victoria Caldwell's impatience became almost tangible. She stepped closer, her high heels clicking sharply against the aisle, each step amplifying the tension in the cabin. "You think you belong here? Don't make me call security mid-flight," she snapped, voice sharp enough to make several passengers flinch. Her eyes darted to the briefcase Serena had firmly placed at her feet, the papers still slightly askew from the previous scuffle. Every detail mattered to Victoria. Every imperfection was an excuse to assert dominance. Serena remained seated, hands resting lightly on the edges of her briefcase. Her expression was composed, yet every micro-movement, the tilt of her head, the calm steadiness of her gaze spoke volumes. Patience, let them expose themselves, she reminded herself internally. She could feel the subtle vibrations of anxiety radiating from Victoria. A slow crack in the heiress's facade that only a calm observer could detect. Let her frustration grow. It will only make the revelation stronger. Several passengers whispered among themselves. Natalie Foster's camera captured every nuance, the tension in Victoria's jaw, the poised demeanor of Serena, the silent anticipation in the cabin. James Bryant adjusted his position, leaning forward slightly, as though even the smallest gesture of support might tip the balance in Serena's favor. The cabin was now an audience in a silent theater, each individual contributing to the intensity of the moment simply by watching. Victoria crouched slightly, reaching for the briefcase. Serena's hand lightly pressed down on it, not in aggression, but in a subtle assertion of control. "Please, I will handle my documents myself," Serena said, her voice low, polite, yet undeniably commanding. The words carried a weight that seemed to cause Victoria to hesitate, her hand hovering mid-air. It was a pause, almost imperceptible, but enough to signal that the balance of power was shifting ever so slightly. Flight attendant Lydia Chen, standing near the galley, exhaled quietly, sensing that Serena was not just any passenger. Ethan Moore shifted uneasily, adjusting his stance, realizing that the situation was no longer a simple confrontation over seat etiquette. This is something far larger, both attendants thought, eyes flicking between Serena and Victoria. The atmosphere had transformed. It was no longer merely a dispute. It was a test of composure and authority. Victoria's face began to redden, her eyes narrowing as she glared down at Serena. "Everyone saw you at the lounge," she hissed, voice quivering slightly despite her attempt to maintain a commanding tone. "We all know your type. You think you can waltz in here with confidence." Her words, meant to belittle, only served to highlight Serena's unwavering calm. The contradiction between entitlement and authority became starkly visible to every onlooker. Serena's mind moved with deliberate clarity. Every word, every gesture will be witnessed. The audience is not just in this cabin, they are everywhere now. She subtly shifted her position, the faintest movement of her hand brushing over the edge of the briefcase, signaling readiness. She did not speak. The silence itself carried authority. Her calm defiance began to resonate with the passengers, creating a quiet solidarity that was almost palpable. Whispers of admiration and disbelief spread in hushed tones. This is more than a confrontation. It is a demonstration of integrity under pressure. Victoria, sensing the slow erosion of her control, stepped back slightly, exhaling sharply. She attempted a dismissive laugh, but it lacked the confidence it carried before. Serena's gaze, steady and unwavering, met Victoria's with subtle intensity. The tension became almost unbearable, each passenger acutely aware of the unfolding drama. Every phone camera, every streaming device, every attentive eye was capturing this moment in real time, preserving it in both memory and digital record. Serena allowed herself a brief, internal acknowledgement. The stage is set, the audience is watching. Now, the real work begins. The subtle dance of power and composure had reached a point where the first true cracks in Victoria's arrogance were evident. The heiress's body language betrayed her growing anxiety, the slight tremor in her hands, the faint tightening of her jaw. Serena, calm and measured, was ready to take the next step. The cabin remained suspended in anticipation, a microcosm of society observing the clash of entitlement versus authority. The passengers, the flight attendants, even the instruments of the aircraft seemed momentarily aligned with the drama. Serena Hayes, seated and serene, understood the moment perfectly. A single, well-timed revelation could turn humiliation into vindication, envy into admiration, and disbelief into undeniable truth. The tension in the first-class cabin was almost tangible. Passengers shifted in their seats, some leaning slightly forward to observe more closely, others fidgeting, phones raised to record. Serena Hayes remained seated, her posture unwavering, her gaze focused on Victoria Caldwell with an intensity that belied her calm exterior. The faint stain of red wine on her navy blazer was insignificant compared to the aura of authority she radiated. Victoria's voice cut sharply across the aisle once again, attempting to regain control. "Flight attendants. I want her removed immediately. She's clearly not supposed to be here." Lydia Chen and Ethan Moore exchanged uneasy glances. Neither wanted to act against protocol, but Victoria's tone and the weight of her family name made hesitation dangerous. Serena, however, remained unmoved, aware that any misstep could escalate the situation. She inhaled slowly, feeling the faint hum of the engines beneath her, grounding herself. Her internal monologue was measured, almost tactical. This is not a battle to shout and scream. This is a battle of presence, of calm authority. One wrong reaction and the moment is lost. I must turn humiliation into proof. She lifted her chin subtly, letting the light from the cabin windows reflect off the briefcase beside her. Every eye in the cabin followed her movement. Some curious, some judgmental, all captivated. Natalie Foster, recording silently from 3 rows back, whispered to James Bryant, She's so calm. It's like she knows something we don't." James nodded slightly, the tension in his shoulders easing a fraction as he realized Serena was in control, not Victoria. The dynamic in the cabin was shifting. The energy that Victoria sought to dominate was beginning to erode. Serena reached into her briefcase with deliberate care, retrieving a small card. She held it up slightly, showing it to Natalie and the adjacent passengers, her movement smooth and calculated. "Perhaps it would help to verify my credentials before making judgments," she said softly, her voice carrying an unshakable confidence. The card read, "Dr. Serena Hayes, Chief Executive Officer, Nova Tech." Victoria's initial reaction was a sneer, dismissive, meant to belittle. "That's the most absurd fake I've ever seen. Nova Tech never heard of it. Anyone can claim to be a CEO." But the subtle shift had already begun in the cabin. Passengers leaned forward, scrutinizing Serena, whispering in astonishment. The phrase CEO began to resonate through the murmurs, challenging the assumptions Victoria had planted in their minds. Serena's internal dialogue acknowledged the moment the first crack has appeared. Her arrogance is visible to everyone, and the audience is beginning to see the contrast. She did not need to raise her voice. The calm authority in her tone and posture said more than any shout could. It was a quiet power, amplified by the disbelief and curiosity of those around her. Victoria, sensing a loss of dominance, stepped closer, attempting to wave off the murmurs of the cabin. "Stop staring. You don't know her. She's probably lying." The effort to reassert control was frantic, almost desperate. Serena's eyes met Victoria's, steady and unwavering. The intensity in that gaze caused a subtle pause. Passengers felt it instinctively, an unspoken tension that Serena was not to be underestimated. The cabin remained silent, the hum of the engines and the faint clink of glasses serving as a backdrop to this psychological standoff. Serena adjusted her position slightly, maintaining poise, letting the energy of control settle around her. She bent just enough to retrieve a few papers that had fallen from her briefcase earlier, doing so deliberately and efficiently, demonstrating competence and control even in the midst of attempted humiliation. Natalie whispered under her breath as she continued filming. "She's incredible. She doesn't react, but she's in command." James nodded again, a sense of anticipation growing. They sensed that Serena was preparing for a calculated move, one that would shift the balance entirely. Victoria, meanwhile, felt the growing unease around her, the silent questioning from passengers whose attention she had assumed she owned. Serena's mind was already planning the next step. "The card has introduced doubt. Now I will let them see the truth, not just claim it." She allowed her gaze to drift toward Victoria, and then back to the cabin. Her calm confidence radiated outward, reaching every passenger, every camera, every recording device. The subtle tension was palpable. Victoria's attempts to dominate were faltering under the weight of Serena's unshakable presence. It was in this quiet, tense moment that the first real shift occurred. Passengers began whispering to each other, reassessing everything they had assumed. Victoria's voice grew sharper, more insistent, yet it lacked the previous confidence. Serena remained seated, her hands lightly touching the briefcase, every movement deliberate, commanding attention without aggression. She was calm, collected, and entirely in control. The stage was set for the next act. Serena Hayes had held her ground through the initial assault, transforming a moment of public humiliation into a poised display of authority. The subtle shift in energy in the cabin indicated that the passengers, the attendants, and even Victoria herself were now aware that Serena's quiet power had begun to change the dynamics of the flight. The tension remained, thick and charged, but the first victory in this silent battle was hers. Victoria Caldwell's frustration had become almost palpable. She moved back and forth along the aisle, gesturing sharply to the flight attendants. "She is not supposed to be in first class, move her now." Her voice echoed across the cabin, jarring even the passengers who had been quietly observing. Lydia Chen and Ethan Moore exchanged nervous glances. Neither wanted to escalate the situation, yet the heiress's entitlement weighed heavily over them. Serena Hayes remained seated, calm and poised, radiating quiet authority despite the wine-stained blazer clinging to her shoulders. The cabin had fallen into an uneasy silence, punctuated only by the faint hum of the engines. Phones hovered in the air like sentinels, capturing each moment. Some passengers whispered to each other, sharing disbelief at Victoria's audacity, while others leaned forward, eyes fixed on Serena. It was clear that everyone sensed the tension, the invisible line between humiliation and authority, and the delicate balance of control in the cabin. Victoria's temper flared. She bent slightly toward Serena's briefcase, the heel of her shoe pressing lightly on the edge, as if to assert dominance. "Do you think you can just sit there, pretending you belong?" she hissed, eyes flashing. The motion caused a few scattered papers to shift slightly, but Serena's hands moved just enough to steady them. She did not speak. She allowed the calm, measured movements to speak for her. Every eye in the cabin noted the contrast, the heiress's desperation against Serena's unwavering composure. Inside, Serena's thoughts were precise, almost tactical. This is where composure counts. Every gesture, every pause, every glance must communicate confidence. I cannot let anger or fear dictate my actions. Let them see strength and quiet authority. She shifted her briefcase slightly, gathering the scattered papers, each motion deliberate. To the passengers watching, it was not just a correction, it was a demonstration of competence, control, and dignity under pressure. Natalie Foster, sitting a few rows back, whispered to James Bryant, who was recording. She's not just calm, she's commanding respect without saying a word. Look at how everyone is watching her." James nodded, fingers hovering over the phone, sharing the live stream with a few friends. The cabin was no longer just a place for air travel, it had become a stage, and Serena was the undisputed presence commanding the attention of all. Victoria, sensing the subtle shift in energy, tried to regain control. She gestured sharply to the flight attendants. "Remove her. Do not let her disrupt this cabin any further." Ethan Moore stepped forward cautiously, while Lydia Chen hesitated. Both attendants knew the situation had escalated beyond protocol. They were balancing etiquette, passenger safety, and the unpredictable behavior of a privileged heir. Serena spoke then, her voice calm and precise, cutting through the tension like a blade. "I assure you, I am a legitimate passenger. My documents and credentials are in order. I will manage my belongings myself." Her words carried a quiet authority that seemed to fill the cabin. Victoria's face twitched with irritation, the attempt to dominate her environment slipping through her fingers as passengers began to murmur in disbelief at Serena's composed response. Inside Serena, a brief flicker of reflection passed through her mind. They may not know yet, but every observer here is beginning to understand. The humiliation was meant to intimidate. Instead, it has revealed the disparity between entitlement and authority. She felt a deep, almost meditative satisfaction in holding her ground. The wine stain on her blazer was no longer an insult. It was a testament to her ability to maintain dignity under pressure. Victoria's movements grew more erratic. She attempted to reach once again toward the briefcase, but Serena's subtle shift of posture, leaning slightly forward while maintaining eye contact, was enough to cause her to pause. The heiress's control of the cabin was cracking, her gestures becoming sharper but less effective. Passengers sensed the faltering authority, the desperation hidden beneath the veneer of arrogance. The murmurs and whispers in the cabin swelled slightly, creating a ripple effect. A few passengers exchanged quiet glances, some raising phones to record. Serena noticed the subtle solidarity forming around her presence, even without a single overt action. The quiet display of control and composure was slowly dismantling Victoria's public assertion of power. Serena allowed herself a slow, controlled breath. Her eyes scanned the cabin briefly, acknowledging the passenger's attention without arrogance. Inside, she reflected on the moment every observer is seeing the truth. The next step must be precise. One misstep, and this equilibrium could be lost. But one measured action, and the narrative will shift entirely. Her mind was already calculating the next move, the moment to reveal undeniable authority that would turn the humiliation into validation. The cabin seemed suspended in time, the faint hum of the engines and the quiet tension filling every corner. Serena Hayes remained seated, calm and unwavering. The scattered papers, the wine-stained blazer, the whispering passengers, all elements of a stage meticulously prepared by circumstance. She had transformed an attempt at humiliation into a moment of poised command. The energy in the cabin had begun to shift, and the first real cracks in Victoria Caldwell's facade were starting to show. The tension in the first-class cabin had reached a boiling point. Victoria Caldwell's frustration radiated in sharp, jagged movements as she stood over Serena Hayes, trying desperately to maintain control of the scene. Yet every glance at Serena revealed the calm, unshakable presence of a woman who refused to yield to intimidation. The scattered papers on the floor, the faint wine stain on her blazer, all contrasted sharply with her composed demeanor. The cabin, now completely silent save for the subtle hum of the engines, seemed to hold its breath along with every passenger. Serena reached slowly into her briefcase. Her hand emerged not with hesitation, but with deliberate purpose, gripping a small, unassuming business card. She held it up for a passenger nearby to see, her movements measured, deliberate. Perhaps it would help to verify my credentials before making assumptions, she said softly, each word precise yet carrying a quiet authority that reverberated through the cabin. The card read, Dr. Serena Hayes, Chief Executive Officer, Nova Tech. The words hung in the air, subtle but undeniable. For a fraction of a second, the cabin seemed suspended, every pair of eyes darting between Serena and Victoria. Victoria's lips curled into a mocking smile, disbelief twisting into sneer. That's ridiculous. Novatech never heard of it. Anyone could claim to be a CEO, she spat, hoping to deflect attention and reclaim authority. But the subtle shift had already begun. Passengers leaned forward, whispering to one another, reassessing what they thought they knew. Serena's internal dialogue remained sharp and controlled. The first crack has appeared. Doubt is seeping into her armor. The passengers are already reconsidering their assumptions. Now is the time to let the truth surface, and let it resonate fully. She allowed her gaze to sweep the cabin, acknowledging the passengers, subtly nodding to Natalie Foster and James Bryant, who continued filming discreetly from behind their seats. The small gestures reinforced the silent solidarity forming around Serena, and Victoria's control began to crumble under the weight of observable reality. Victoria's jaw tightened, her confidence slipping despite her efforts to appear composed. Stop staring at her. You don't know her, she barked, glancing nervously around at the cabin. Serena's calm, unbroken demeanor rendered the heiress's outburst almost absurd. Every passenger could see the contrast, the desperation of entitlement against the quiet assurance of a woman who knew her value and position. The hum of whispered commentary spread quietly through the rows, creating a ripple of collective awareness. Serena, noting the subtle fractures in Victoria's poise, began the next measured step of her silent strategy. She tilted her briefcase slightly, revealing a corner of a document tucked neatly inside. Her movements were casual, almost unremarkable, yet deliberate. The passengers watching could sense that something significant was about to be revealed. Natalie's phone lens captured the moment in perfect clarity, while James whispered to a nearby passenger, "She's about to show everyone she's not just any passenger." Victoria's shoulders stiffened, a flicker of panic crossing her face. She stepped back slightly, suddenly aware that the narrative was no longer entirely under her control. Serena's calm authority, her meticulous composure, and the subtle hints of her real status were reshaping the cabin's perception. The silent tension thickened, an electric charge that connected every observer in shared anticipation. Inside, Serena's mind was a precise orchestration of strategy and patience. This is the moment to reveal the undeniable, not with anger, not with shouting, but with evidence. Facts will speak louder than insults, and silence will carry more weight than cries. She exhaled slowly, adjusting her posture, and let the moment stretch, allowing the passenger's attention to focus entirely on her. The subtle power dynamic had shifted. Victoria's dominance was quietly, but undeniably, eroding. Finally, Serena spoke, her voice still calm but measured, Each word precise. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Novatech. Every contract, every partnership my company holds is verifiable. If you wish, I can provide immediate confirmation." The cabin reacted instantly. Passengers exchanged incredulous glances, whispers turning into low murmurs. Even the flight attendants paused, caught between protocol and the emerging reality before them. Victoria's attempt to dismiss the moment faltered. The brief sneer she attempted failed to mask the subtle fear creeping into her expression. She stepped back, scanning the cabin, realizing that the narrative had begun to escape her grasp. Serena's poised declaration, combined with the visible evidence she hinted at, had begun to dismantle the heiress's previously uncontested authority. The passengers, the flight attendants, and even Victoria herself were now suspended in this delicate tension. Every glance, every quiet murmur, every raised camera contributed to the unfolding drama. Serena Hayes had not yet fully revealed her credentials, but the first twist had landed the aura of quiet authority, reinforced by deliberate action, had begun to turn humiliation into validation. The stage was set for the next pivotal moment, where reality and truth would confront entitlement head-on. The cabin's atmosphere had shifted palpably. Whispers rippled from the back rows forward as passengers leaned closer, drawn into the unfolding drama. Serena Hayes, seated with an unbroken posture, lifted her laptop from the briefcase and connected it to the cabin's shared display system. The subtle hum of the plane's engines underscored the quiet authority she now exuded. Every motion was deliberate, calculated, and calm, demanding attention without a single raised voice. Victoria Caldwell froze mid-step, her jaw tightening as she realized Serena intended to provide evidence. "What are you doing?" she hissed, voice trembling slightly despite her efforts to sound commanding. The flickering glow of the cabin lights reflected off the polished surfaces, catching the sparkle in her jewelry. But her confidence was waning. Passengers instinctively shifted to watch, capturing the tension with their phones, the live stream growing with each passing second. Serena clicked through her laptop with precise, fluid movements. A series of documents appeared on the main screen: official emails, contracts, and executive correspondence confirming her status as the Chief Executive Officer of Novatech. The passengers leaned forward collectively, eyes widening, whispers cascading through the cabin. Natalie Foster and James Bryant continued filming discreetly, capturing every word, every subtle glance, every micro-expression on Victoria's face. Victoria's lips parted, as if to respond, but the words never came. She realized that her previous attempts to undermine Serena were crumbling before her very eyes. The cabin's energy shifted further as Serena spoke calmly, her voice clear and controlled. "I am fully authorized to act on behalf of Novatech in all business matters. Every document you see here is verifiable and current." The words carried a quiet power, each syllable reinforcing her credibility. Flight attendants Lydia Chen and Ethan Moore exchanged astonished glances. Their training had never prepared them for a scenario like this. A passenger not only standing her ground, but asserting undeniable authority in front of an entire cabin. The subtle hierarchy of power had inverted. Victoria's aggressive posturing now seemed almost theatrical in contrast to Serena's composed presence. Every gesture, every breath, every calculated pause amplified Serena's authority in the eyes of the observers. Inside, Serena's mind raced with precision. The first twist has been effective. Doubt is present. Now the final verification will cement credibility and make the humiliation complete. She paused briefly, letting the murmurs of the cabin swell. The collective anticipation of the passengers, amplified by the live stream cameras, created a palpable tension that enveloped the space. Victoria's arrogance faltered further. The cracks in her facade had become visible to all. Serena took a deliberate step, opening a document that contained official executive confirmation from the Novatech Board of Directors. The screen displayed her formal title, her photograph, and her signature, unmistakable proof of her authority. Gasps erupted throughout the cabin. Some passengers whispered, "She's really the CEO." Others raised their phones higher, the live stream's count climbing rapidly as viewers watched Serena quietly but definitively reclaim her dignity. Victoria's hand twitched, unsure whether to reach out or retreat. Her confidence, once a shield, had become a liability, exposed under the scrutiny of the cabin's collective gaze. Serena's calm presence highlighted the stark contrast. One woman, seemingly ordinary, yet holding incontrovertible power. Another, privileged and arrogant, exposed in front of an audience far larger than she could have anticipated. The subtle murmur of passengers transformed into audible whispers of disbelief. She really is the CEO all this time, and we didn't even know. Serena's measured actions had done more than establish her credibility. They had shifted the narrative completely. The cabin now watched not just a confrontation, but a demonstration of intellect, poise, and strategic control. Victoria's composure faltered visibly. She straightened abruptly, attempting to regain authority, but her words stumbled over themselves. That's fake," she protested, her voice wavering. Serena's eyes met hers, unwavering, calm, and confident. The passengers could see it all, a woman asserting rightful authority, a young heiress confronted with irrefutable truth, and the quiet satisfaction of integrity prevailing. Inside Serena, a subtle sense of affirmation arose. The first twist has landed. The cabin now knows the truth. The stage is set for the next step, the moment where the humiliation of entitlement will meet its undeniable consequences. She allowed herself a slow, controlled breath, eyes sweeping across the cabin, connecting silently with those who had witnessed her resilience, her poise, and her unwavering authority. Every camera, every phone, every glance had captured the unfolding revelation. The tension remained, but Serena Hayes had transformed the scene. What began as an act of public humiliation had become a demonstration of undeniable competence and authority. The passengers, the flight attendants, and even Victoria Caldwell were now participants in a drama where the balance of power had shifted irreversibly. The next act would elevate the stakes even further, leading toward a climax that no one aboard the plane or watching online would forget. The atmosphere in first class had transformed into something almost cinematic. Every passenger was acutely aware that they were witnessing not just a confrontation, but a dramatic shift in power and authority. Serena Hayes sat poised, the faint red stain on her blazer a muted reminder of the earlier attack. Yet every movement she made conveyed calm precision. Her laptop remained connected to the cabin display, casting a soft glow across her determined face, emphasizing the quiet authority she exuded. Victoria Caldwell's composure was unraveling. Her attempts to regain control grew more erratic, sharp gestures punctuating her rising frustration. "I demand she leaves her seat. This is ridiculous." Everyone saw her cause trouble. Her voice trembled slightly despite her efforts to sound commanding. The cabin, once tense but uncertain, now leaned into the unfolding chaos with the heightened awareness that Serena's next move would define the remainder of the flight. Flight attendants Lydia Chen and Ethan Moore exchanged glances that betrayed a mixture of shock and admiration. Their training had prepared them for unruly passengers, but nothing like this, a confrontation where authority was quietly but unmistakably demonstrated by the very person being targeted. Lydia swallowed hard, realizing that Serena was not reacting with panic or anger. She was orchestrating the moment, turning humiliation into strategic advantage. Serena's internal focus was razor-sharp. Victoria is unraveling. Every passenger sees it. The next step must solidify reality, not just reputation. She opened a secure document on her laptop, revealing a series of contracts and executive confirmations from Novatech's board of directors. Each page displayed her formal title, signature, and photograph, leaving no room for denial. The glow from the screen illuminated her composed expression, highlighting the contrast between her calm assurance and Victoria's flustered state. The murmurs that had begun subtly earlier now grew louder. Natalie Foster's phone captured every frame as she whispered, "She really is the CEO." James Bryant, sitting on the other side of the aisle, nodded, his fingers flying across his own device to ensure the live stream captured everything. Passengers craned their necks, some whispering in disbelief, others leaning forward, collectively acknowledging the undeniable proof of Serena's authority. The cabin was captivated, almost spellbound. Victoria's confidence faltered further. Her face paled slightly as she realized that her attempts to assert control were failing. "That's fake. It has to be fake," she stammered, trying to regain some semblance of composure. Serena's calm gaze met hers, unwavering, and the contrast became impossible for the cabin to ignore. One woman, poise intact despite an initial act of humiliation. Another, stripped of public dominance, exposed for all to see. The quiet tension became electric. Serena allowed a faint pause, letting the murmurs and gasps fill the cabin, reinforcing the gravity of the revelation. Then, speaking with measured authority, she addressed the entire first-class section. "As you can see, I am authorized to represent Novatech in all executive matters. The documents displayed are current and verifiable. My role here is legitimate, and my presence is fully warranted." Each word carried weight, underscoring the disparity between entitlement and merit. Victoria's shoulders stiffened. Her gestures became sharper, more desperate, a physical manifestation of the internal panic she was struggling to conceal. Passengers began whispering to one another more audibly, some nodding subtly, others exchanging incredulous glances. The live stream count had skyrocketed, viewers witnessing the unraveling of a privileged facade in real time. Serena's poised demonstration had begun to shift not just the perceptions aboard the plane, but also the narrative beyond it. From the back of the cabin, Lydia Chen finally found her voice, though careful to remain neutral. "Miss Caldwell, perhaps we should let her handle her own documents." Ethan Moore nodded subtly, sensing that the power dynamics had shifted. Victoria's face twitched with irritation, realizing the flight attendants no longer fully backed her narrative. The silent authority Serena had cultivated now held more influence than Victoria's arrogance. Inside, Serena reflected briefly, aware that the culmination of this moment was approaching. This is the pivot point. The audience, the cabin, the cameras, the live stream is fully engaged. The next confirmation will be decisive. she prepared to escalate the verification to the executive level, a move that would not just validate her credentials, but also establish undeniable consequences for the privilege-driven disruption caused by Victoria Caldwell. The cabin remained tense, but a subtle shift in energy had occurred. Where Victoria's voice had once dominated, uncertainty now lingered. Passengers' attention had shifted entirely to Serena, whose calm and deliberate demeanor had transformed a scene of potential humiliation into a display of control, credibility, and poise. Every whisper, every phone camera, every shared glance contributed to the mounting anticipation, setting the stage for the next, more consequential revelation. As Serena prepared to take the next step, the air in the cabin seemed charged with expectation. This was no longer merely a dispute over seating. It was a live demonstration of authority, credibility, and strategic calm under pressure. Victoria Caldwell's unchecked privilege and arrogance were facing undeniable verification, and Serena Hayes was guiding the cabin and the audience outside it toward an inevitable climax. The final act, Serena knew, would not just vindicate her dignity, it would define the consequences of entitlement exposed to the light of truth. The wheels of Flight 842 hummed steadily beneath the cabin as the passengers leaned forward, fully absorbed in the unfolding drama. Victoria Caldwell, sensing the mounting scrutiny, shifted nervously, her composure unraveling with every passing second. She had attempted to control the narrative, to maintain her image of authority. But the calm, deliberate presence of Serena Hayes now dominated the cabin in every visible way. Each document displayed, each measured word Serena spoke, further eroded Victoria's dominance. Charles Caldwell, Victoria's father, was seated several rows back, having been summoned by the escalating situation. His usually confident demeanor was replaced by a tight-lipped concern as he watched his daughter flounder under the gaze of the cabin and the multitude of cameras capturing the event. Serena's quiet command contrasted sharply with Victoria's frantic gestures, making the disparity in control unmistakable. Victoria attempted one more sharp, accusatory gesture, pointing at Serena's briefcase. "She's lying. This is all fake." Her voice trembled, betraying the cracks in her facade. The cabin remained silent for a moment, absorbing the tension, before murmurs rippled among the passengers. Natalie Foster and James Bryant, positioned strategically to capture the best angles, continued recording, documenting every hesitation, every micro-expression, every subtle sign of Victoria's unraveling. Serena's eyes flickered briefly to Charles Caldwell, reading the concern etched into his face. She maintained her calm, her voice steady and measured as she addressed both the cabin and the recording devices around her. "Mr. Caldwell, all documents and executive confirmations displayed here are verifiable and current. My credentials are authentic, and my presence is legitimate. Any assertion to the contrary is false." The words landed with deliberate weight, filling the cabin with undeniable authority. The murmurs intensified, passengers exchanging incredulous glances. Whispers of admiration for Serena's poise and composure spread quietly but insistently throughout the cabin. Victoria's frantic gestures now seemed increasingly theatrical, her arrogance crumbling as each passenger began to recognize the reality of Serena's position. The contrast between privilege and proven authority had become stark, undeniable, and almost palpable in the tense atmosphere. Charles Caldwell rose slowly, approaching the scene with careful steps, his voice, usually confident and commanding, was subdued, almost pleading. "Victoria, please, let's handle this calmly." Victoria glanced at him, frustration and panic flashing across her face. Her earlier bravado had faltered, replaced by visible doubt. The collective awareness of the cabin, coupled with Serena's calm demonstration of authority, made it clear that the heiress's attempt at dominance had failed spectacularly. Serena, ever composed, allowed the moment to stretch, letting the silence underscore the reality of the situation. This is the pivotal moment, she thought, where truth and authority intersect. The passengers, the flight attendants, and even Victoria's father are witnesses. Every gesture, every word, every pause reinforces what has been earned through competence and dignity. She adjusted the briefcase slightly, signaling preparedness, readiness, and complete control of her environment. Victoria's shoulders slumped minutely, the first visible signs of total defeat. Charles Caldwell, recognizing the irreversible shift, turned to Serena, his voice filled with genuine concern and apology. "Dr. Hayes, I'm so sorry for this incident. We need to correct this immediately. Please, forgive my daughter's behavior." The cabin's attention snapped fully to Serena, the live stream capturing the father's plea and Victoria's increasingly distressed demeanor. The passengers erupted into quiet murmurs, some leaning in for closer observation, others raising their phones to document the interaction. Natalie whispered to James, "This is surreal. He's actually apologizing, and she hasn't even said anything yet." James nodded, his fingers still recording, knowing that the cabin was witnessing a live demonstration of dignity, authority, and the consequences of unchecked entitlement. Victoria tried to interject, her voice quivering. "Dad, get up. Don't beg. She doesn't." But Serena's gaze remained steady, unshaken, absorbing every movement, every word, every tension-filled breath. The moment had solidified. The cabin recognized that entitlement, arrogance, and privilege had been publicly exposed, and the ramifications were immediate. Serena's calm authority had turned humiliation into validation, and the consequences of Victoria's actions were now unavoidable. The cabin, fully aware of the escalating stakes, seemed suspended in collective acknowledgement. Every whispered comment, every raised camera, and every passenger's glance reinforced Serena Hayes's position as the undeniable authority on the flight. The unfolding scene had transformed from a confrontation into a public reckoning, one where entitlement met the unassailable force of truth, integrity, and competence. Serena Hayes remained seated, calm and composed, as the cabin absorbed the weight of the unfolding events. Victoria Caldwell's previous defiance had crumbled under the scrutiny of the passengers, flight attendants, and now her own father, Charles Caldwell. The cabin air seemed heavier, charged with a mixture of disbelief, anticipation, and the quiet thrill of witnessing justice unfold. Serena's gaze swept methodically across the space, acknowledging the attention without a hint of arrogance. Her calm authority dominated. The earlier humiliation transformed into a poised demonstration of dignity. Victoria attempted one last protest, her voice high and desperate, trembling despite her attempts at control. "This isn't fair. You're overreacting." It's just Serena's eyes met hers, unwavering and resolute. The heiress faltered, silenced by the quiet command emanating from Serena's demeanor. Every passenger in the cabin now sensed the inevitable outcome. The final reckoning was at hand. Serena lifted her briefcase carefully, setting it on the foldable tray in front of her. The papers inside, once scattered by Victoria's aggressive gestures, now lay neatly organized, pristine despite the previous chaos. She drew in a steady breath, the faint red stain on her blazer a muted testament to the confrontation, yet irrelevant in the presence of undeniable authority. Her voice, soft yet cutting through the tension like a precise instrument, carried across the cabin. Your daughter's actions have consequences. The contract scheduled for signing, worth $4.5 billion, is void. The decision is final. Gasps filled the cabin. Some passengers murmured in disbelief, while others whispered quietly to themselves, acknowledging Serena's calm decisiveness. The live stream now surged. Viewers online witnessing the final act of validation, the humiliation had been transformed into justice. Victoria's face drained of color, her eyes widening as the realization hit the very deal she had disrupted was irreversibly lost. Charles Caldwell stepped forward, urgency and shame evident in his posture. "Dr. Hayes, please, we are deeply sorry. My daughter acted without foresight. We will address this immediately." Serena's gaze softened only briefly, a measured acknowledgement of accountability, then returned to the matter at hand. Her composure remained unbroken. The cabin remained silent, every whispering observer attuned to her authority. The balance of power had shifted entirely. Victoria's voice cracked, panic overtaking her remaining arrogance. "Dad, don't beg. This is ridiculous." "She's just Serena," raised a hand slightly, signaling calm, and the cabin quieted further. Every passenger, phone camera, and attendant witnessed the culmination of entitlement meeting unwavering authority. Serena's quiet but deliberate presence ensured that the outcome was not only fair, but undeniable. Officer Garrett, who had been waiting discreetly at the rear of the cabin, approached at Serena's subtle signal. Victoria's protests intensified but faltered under the officer's measured presence. "Miss Caldwell, you are being escorted for assaulting a passenger," Officer Garrett said firmly. The cabin collectively held its breath as the heiress was guided toward the rear of the plane, her previous composure replaced entirely by trembling frustration. Cameras continued recording. The live stream now captured the final moments of accountability in real time. Passengers whispered softly, some shaking their heads, some nodding, all aware that they had witnessed the fall of entitlement and privilege in real time. Serena's calm remained unshaken. She had transformed an attempted humiliation into a demonstration of authority and dignity. Her eyes swept the cabin one last time, connecting briefly with Natalie Foster and James Bryant, who had faithfully documented every moment. Their nods of acknowledgement met her calm smile, a silent testament to resilience under pressure. Inside, Serena's thoughts reflected measured satisfaction. The moment has passed, but the impact resonates. Entitlement has consequences, authority holds weight, and dignity is preserved. She carefully returned her briefcase to its original position, adjusted her seat slightly, and allowed herself a brief exhale. The cabin's energy, previously charged with tension, now settled into quiet respect and subdued awe. The live stream continued to grow, the narrative spreading rapidly online. Viewers around the world watched as entitlement and arrogance were publicly confronted, as authority and composure triumphed. Serena had not raised her voice, nor had she reacted in anger. Instead, she had relied on precision, patience, and undeniable evidence to achieve an outcome that was both just and public. Victoria Caldwell escorted away, left a space that was filled by Serena's calm, authoritative presence, a clear symbol of resilience and integrity. By the time the plane reached cruising altitude, the cabin atmosphere had shifted from tense confrontation to quiet admiration. Passengers murmured quietly about the extraordinary display they had witnessed. Serena Hayes sat back, composed, her hands lightly resting on her briefcase. The final act of authority had been executed. The humiliation had been transformed, the consequences enforced, and the cabin, and by extension, the world watching via live stream, had witnessed a powerful demonstration of integrity prevailing over entitlement. The first-class cabin had settled into an unusual quiet. The hum of the engines was now accompanied by a tangible sense of awe and respect. Serena Hayes, seated with composed elegance, allowed herself a subtle exhale. The confrontation with Victoria Caldwell, the heiress who had tried to humiliate her publicly, had reached its resolution. Serena's calm had transformed humiliation into authority, frustration into proof, and entitlement into accountability. Passengers whispered softly among themselves, eyes occasionally flicking toward Serena. Natalie Foster lowered her phone, having captured the entirety of the incident, and offered a discreet nod to Serena. James Bryant adjusted his camera, continuing to film, but the sense of awe in the cabin was unmistakable. The narrative had shifted completely. What began as a scene of humiliation had become a lesson in poise, dignity, and the quiet, unshakable power of truth. Victoria Caldwell, now escorted toward the rear by Officer Garrett, glared back occasionally, her face pale and expression unraveling. Her father, Charles Caldwell, had remained in his seat, a mixture of frustration and regret etched into every line of his face. Serena observed them both briefly, acknowledging the complex layers of human emotion, privilege confronted with consequences, arrogance faced with authority, and the quiet triumph of composure over impulsive power. Serena leaned slightly back, adjusting her blazer to smooth the faint red stain from the earlier wine spill. The minor blemish did nothing to diminish the aura of control she exuded. Her mind reflected on the sequence of events, each measured word, each deliberate action. Every pause and subtle gesture had contributed to the undeniable assertion of authority. The cabin had been an audience not only to a confrontation, but to a demonstration of leadership under pressure. Inside, Serena considered the wider implications. This is about more than a single flight, a single act of entitlement. It is about the choices we make under scrutiny, the calm assertion of truth, and the courage to stand firm when silence would be easier. Her thoughts were both reflective and purposeful. She understood that by maintaining composure and authority, she had set an example for not only those in the cabin, but for the world watching online, capturing the moment in real time. Passengers began to exhale quietly, some nodding to one another, silently acknowledging Serena's conduct. The energy in the cabin shifted from tension to respect. Lydia Chen and Ethan Moore, the flight attendants, allowed themselves subtle smiles, recognizing the extraordinary example of leadership they had witnessed firsthand. Serena's presence had redefined the atmosphere. The fear and tension that had pervaded the cabin were replaced with admiration and recognition of integrity. Serena allowed herself a small, reflective smile. Strength is not always loud. Strength is measured, deliberate, and evident in moments where silence could be easier. She glanced briefly toward Natalie and James, grateful for their documentation of the event. Every recording, every whispered acknowledgement, Every subtle gesture of recognition contributed to the collective understanding that what they had witnessed was a moment of quiet empowerment, dignity, and truth prevailing over arrogance. The cabin's energy continued to transform. Passengers who had initially watched out of curiosity or discomfort now absorbed the full lesson of the event. Victoria Caldwell's failure to assert authority in the face of undeniable truth served as a stark contrast to Serena's calm, methodical, and unshakable composure. The lesson was clear entitlement without accountability falters, while integrity and measured action endure and inspire. Serena reflected on the broader narrative. Moments like these are not just about asserting authority. They are about creating change through example. Humiliation can become empowerment, challenge can become clarity, and chaos can be transformed into an undeniable demonstration of strength. Her gaze swept across the cabin one final time, connecting silently with the passengers who had observed every nuance, every subtle gesture, every deliberate pause. The impact of her presence had left a lasting impression, quietly but powerfully shaping the narrative. As the plane continued its journey toward Los Angeles, Serena remained poised. The cabin had shifted from a space of confrontation to one of quiet acknowledgement, where integrity and composure had triumphed over impulsive privilege. The experience, though challenging, had reinforced the values Serena had long upheld: dignity under pressure, authority through calm, and the transformative power of truth. The passengers, the attendants, and even Victoria Caldwell had borne witness to a demonstration of leadership that would resonate far beyond the flight. The first-class cabin had finally settled into a profound quiet. Serena Hayes, seated upright and composed, allowed herself a reflective breath. The ordeal with Victoria Caldwell had concluded, but the resonance of the event lingered. Every passenger had witnessed the transformation of humiliation into authority, entitlement into accountability, and tension into a subtle lesson in dignity and composure. Passengers continued to murmur among themselves, exchanging glances filled with newfound respect. The previously chaotic energy had dissipated, replaced by quiet admiration for Serena's calm command. Natalie Foster and James Bryant lowered their phones after ensuring every detail was captured. Recognizing that they had documented more than an incident, they had documented a masterclass in leadership and integrity. Serena's gaze moved toward the window, the golden glow of the approaching Los Angeles sunset reflecting off the polished surfaces of the cabin. Inside, her thoughts were calm, deliberate. This is about more than this flight, more than a public humiliation. It is about the choices we make when tested, the courage to uphold truth and dignity, and the strength to lead even when silence would be easier. She adjusted her blazer slightly, smoothing the faint red stain, now more a symbol of endurance than insult. Victoria Caldwell had been escorted to the rear by Officer Garrett. Her posture slumped, face pale, arrogance replaced by an unmistakable realization of consequence. Charles Caldwell remained seated, an expression of regret shadowing his face. His attempts to salvage the moment futile in light of the clear authority Serena had demonstrated. The cabin's witnesses, from flight attendants to passengers, understood the depth of what had transpired: entitlement confronted by unassailable truth, arrogance met with measured composure. Serena allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She considered the broader implications: the strength it takes to remain calm under scrutiny, the dignity of acting without anger, the power of truth when wielded deliberately. Every gesture, every word, every micro-expression had contributed to the narrative that now radiated across the cabin and beyond. Amplified by the live stream reaching viewers worldwide, the lesson was unmistakable respect and authority are earned through composure, integrity, and action, not inherited privilege. The passengers' reactions were a quiet testament to this lesson. Some whispered, nodding subtly to one another, acknowledging Serena's poise. Lydia Chen and Ethan Moore, the flight attendants, allowed themselves a subtle smile, recognizing the extraordinary presence they had witnessed. Even Victoria's father, Charles Caldwell, seemed to acknowledge internally the contrast between unchecked privilege and demonstrated leadership. Serena's mind reflected on the event with measured clarity. Humiliation can be transformed. Challenge can be met with calm. Authority can be asserted without aggression. The lesson is far-reaching for those who witnessed it here and those who will see it online. She glanced briefly toward Natalie and James, giving a subtle nod of acknowledgement, recognizing their role in documenting and amplifying the impact of what had unfolded. As the flight continued toward its destination, Serena allowed herself a small, reflective smile. The moment had been exhausting, but it had reaffirmed the values she had always upheld: composure, integrity, and quiet authority. The passengers who had observed the event were left with a lasting impression, a lesson in resilience and dignity that extended beyond the cabin walls and the screens of countless viewers around the world. The cabin gradually resumed a sense of normalcy, though the memory of the confrontation lingered in every thoughtful gaze and whispered comment. Serena Hayes remained a figure of calm strength, her presence a quiet but powerful reminder that true authority is earned through poise, preparation, and unwavering adherence to truth. The event, captured and broadcast in real time, had not only validated her credentials, but also illustrated a profound principle: entitlement without accountability falters, while integrity under pressure endures and inspires. As the plane approached Los Angeles, the passengers reflected on what they had witnessed. Serena's quiet composure, her strategic use of evidence, and her unwavering authority had turned an attempted act of humiliation into a demonstration of leadership and moral clarity. The cabin, the live stream audience, and the witnesses aboard had all observed a lesson in dignity, the power of calm authority, and the consequences of unchecked privilege. Serena's poise left an indelible mark, a story of resilience that would resonate far beyond the confines of Flight 842. The story of Dr. Serena Hayes teaches us that dignity, integrity, and calm composure are far more powerful than aggression or entitlement. Life often places us in situations where others underestimate or humiliate us, whether in professional settings, social circles, or family dynamics. Serena's response shows that facing injustice with clarity and measured action transforms humiliation into strength and opportunity. For older audiences, the lesson resonates deeply. Resilience is cultivated over time, and real authority comes from consistent demonstration of competence, patience, and self-respect. It reminds us that reacting impulsively may offer a fleeting sense of control, but strategic, thoughtful responses create lasting impact. The story also highlights accountability. Those who wield privilege without responsibility eventually face the consequences of their actions. In practical terms, the key takeaway is simple yet profound. Preserve your integrity. Validate your position through truth, and act decisively without losing composure. By doing so, we not only protect our dignity but also thank you for watching and witnessing this incredible story of resilience and integrity. If Serena Hayes' courage inspired you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful, real-life stories that remind us of the strength of dignity and the impact of standing firm.